And I would like to thank Mr. Santakumar sir and Praveen Kumar sir and Magesh sir to give this wonderful opportunity to me. And let me introduce myself first. This is Ramesh Palanivel, and I am the MVP of C Corner, and I'm an author and I'm a speaker, and I have 3 years of experience in Microsoft technologies. And you can follow me on Facebook and as well as in LinkedIn. And in this session, we are going to cover how to perform CRUD operation with ASP .NET MVC using AngularJS. This is our agenda for today's session. In this session, we are going to cover what is an ASP.NET MVC and difference between MVC and web forms and basics of entity framework and its types of approaches. And finally, we are going to cover what is an Angular and basic things about Angular, module, and component. Then finally, we are going to implement the demo application. What is ASP.NET MVC? In MVC is a model view controller, which is help us to divide our application into 3 main components: model, view, and controller. If you are a beginner, you may have a question: what is model and view and controller? Don't worry about it right now. In our upcoming slides, we are going to cover what is model and what is view and what is controller. And MVC is a frequently used web development framework in current software industries. It may be in Java, or it may be in PHP, or it may be in .NET. In all the software companies nowadays, they are focusing on developing an application using MVC pattern. And you can see the image here. This is the basic workflow of MVC. Here you can see the server going to the user going to send the request to the server, and the server receives the request from the user and send the request to the appropriate controller. Then the controller receives the web request from server, and it's called the model to bind the data from database, and the model again respond and send the data to controller. Then the controller receives the data from model, and the controller sends the data response to the view for user. Model. What is model? A model is nothing but it's a set of classes and set of properties. You can see the image here. We have created a employee model class. It's a simple C# class. It's a simple C# class. Here we have created an employee model, and we have created some properties for our employee model, which is like employee ID, employee name, city, and age. And model is part of the application, and it's responsible for application business logics and data manipulation, which means the model going to act as our business, the model going to perform the application business logics, and it going to perform a data manipulation or data. If example, if you want to take if you are taking a list of employees from an employee table, then we want to filter the list of employees whose name starts with John. We have to filter the record using model. To get the list of employees from an employee table, and we are filtering the record, this all the data manipulation and business logics we can achieve using model. And what is view? View is nothing. It's simple user interface, which helps user to enter some input to our application, and he can see some output to the application, which means displaying the record using view. The view is nothing. It only going to have some HTML controls like text boxes, drop down list, buttons, checkbox, etc. or any other HTML DOM elements. Here you can see we have created a simple view here, the view has 3 text boxes and 2 HTML buttons. Text box name, city, age, and the button cancel and save. This is the sample UI for this is the sample UI. And what is controller? Controller is nothing but it is an intermediator between our model and view. If example, if the user sends the request to the server sends the request to the appropriate controller, the controller calls the model to get the data and receive the data from model and send back to the view, and the user can view the view. Here the controller is intermediator between our model, our view. So it acts as the controller going to handle only the request and response in our application. I hope everyone now you may have some better understanding of what is ASP NVC, and now we can see what is the difference between ASP NVC and web forms. In ASP NVC, we have seen the list of items here, difference between the MVC and web forms. Here, MVC is a model view controller pattern and it is a lightweight. In ASP.NET web form is not a lightweight and it's a tightly coupled application, and it is also called as an event-driven development model. You may have a question, what is event-driven development model? The event-driven development model means in web form we have controls like text boxes, buttons, checkboxes, that everything will be a server control. When we perform any action on any controls, it's going to hit the server, and the server again responds to the particular user. If example, if you take a drop-down list, when we select any items in this drop-down list, it's going to, whenever we select a drop-down list, the drop-down list event going to trigger and it's going to hit the server, and the server perform any validations or any actions, then again it sends response to the user. This is called as event-driven development model. And ASP.NET MVC has HTML helpers. On ASP.NET MVC has HTML helpers, and web forms we have server controls. Here in ASP.NET MVC we have only simple HTML elements. The Racer pages supports to write a HTML tag using some predefined HTML helpers. But in web forms, we already have predefined controls. We can drag and drop in our web form and we can use it. And ASP MVC doesn't support a view state, but in ASP MVC web forms, it supports view state in a client side. In ASP MVC, it is a root-based URL. It's based on controller and not on physical path, which means we have a root configuration in ASP MVC, and we can create a root for our controller and action. When we redirect a page, if the controller or if the action is not exist in the URL, it will return it's a 404 error. The web form also going to return the 404 error. The difference between these things, the MVC going to check the code file, but the ASP web form going to check the physical file. And ASP.NET MVC, MVC views and business logics are kept separately. Already said, in MVC we are dividing our application into 3 main components, which means we are going to split a view and model and controller in a separate files. But in ASP web forms, it's a tightly coupled. We are having designing HTML elements, and we are having JavaScript, and we are having server script. Everything going to be in a single page, and it is called as tightly coupled application. In ASP.NET MVC, we have a layout to maintain the consistent menu and logo. But in ASP.NET Web Form, we have a master page to render that to maintain the consistent menu and look, which means you all know about what is master page, which is a master page which is going to consistent the static contents, and the dynamic contents going to be rendered as a child page. In the MVC, we are using a layout as a master page, and we are going to render our index view page as a child page in our layout. In ASP.NET MVC has partial views for code reusability. In ASP MVC, we have an option to create a partial view. Example, any view has to be a repeat in any more other places. We can create it as a partial views. But in web form, in ASP web form, we have an user controls for code reusability. We can create our custom user controls and we can reuse it wherever we require. And ASP.NET MVC is an open source, and ASP.NET web form is not an open source. Entity framework. What is entity framework? Entity framework is nothing but it's an object relational mapper, which is help us to map our database table relations, and it reduces the data access code for developers. You can see the example here. We have some ADO.NET code, which means we are going to take a list of employees from a table. Employee table, we have to write the below lines in ADO.NET code. We have to create a connection string for our database, and we have to create a command, and we have to execute the command, and we have to set it the data set, and we have to bind it the view or grid. But in entity context, we don't need to write those lines. We can simply create an entity, and the entity has a list of the entity has connection with our data DB context. And the DB context, we are getting all the list of tables, and we can get the list from our tables, and we can send the list to the response as a UA, which means we can send the response to the view. And you can see here the UA. This is the basic workflow of entity framework. When the user requests to the business layer, the business layer sends the request to the data access layer. The data access layer using entity context, the entity context has a communication with DB, and it get the data, and it can filter. If you want filter anything, you can perform here, and you can send the data back to the business layer, and the business layer again sends the data as a response to the UA.
Hey Ramesh, sorry for interrupting. You can.
The entity framework has three types of approaches. One is code first, and the another one is database first, and the another one is model first. The code first approach is nothing but we already discussed about what is model. Using the C# class, we are creating a database that is called as code first approach here. In database approach is nothing but we already have a database in our SQL server, and we are going to reuse it, and we are going to implement it. The database approaches, it helps us to reduce the amount of code that we need to write, which means we don't write any classes to create a code. If you want to develop application using code first approach, you want to create a class for each table. But in database approach, you don't need to write those lines, and you can directly use this database from your SQL server, and you can implement in our application. The model first approach is similar to code first approach, but here we have an ORM designer to implement our model class, and the ORM designer going to create our database in our SQL server. Now you have better understanding of what is ASP MVC and what is the entity framework and its types of approaches. If you have a question, you can share via Facebook. And Angular. What is an Angular? An Angular is a new version of AngularJS, and it is maintained by Google. And Angular is a popular MVC framework for complex web application development. And Angular is a completely rewritten version of AngularJS. And Angular is a component-based application. In Angular is everything will be a component-based development. And Angular is a mobile supportability, and it has better performance compared than AngularJS. And Angular supports multiple languages like TypeScript, ECMAScript 5, and version 6 and 7. The ECMAScript means it's a JavaScript standard, officially is called as ECMAScript. But in Angular, most developers using TypeScript. The TypeScript is superset of JavaScript and which is developed by Microsoft, and it is an open source framework. Then we are going to see features of Angular components. And I already said in Angular, everything going to be a component-based application. And the TypeScript is an advanced features of Angular, which has a superset of JavaScript, which is going to convert our TypeScript to a JavaScript. TypeScript is a simple C#. It seems like a simple C# class, and it has some properties, interfaces. We can implement a methods. We can write every oops concept in TypeScript. When the Angular compiles, it's going to convert our TypeScript file into a JavaScript file, and it's going to be rendered in our browser. And services is nothing. It is like an inheritance. If you are going to perform any piece of code repeatedly in your application, you don't need to write in all the places. You can write it as a service, and you can use the service in all the components and modules wherever it is required. And components of Angular. In Angular, we have a module-based application. Module has collection of services, components, directives, and configurations. In every Angular application, there is one root module, which is called app.module. It will be a root module for application. It's going to render an index page. Depends on that module configuration. And component is a class, and it has a logical piece of code. We are going to create a component using TypeScript, and the TypeScript going to convert the class as a JavaScript code in a browser. Every component has a template property which is defining the view for that particular component. The next one is templates. Templates are used to define the views in Angular components. Which means in a above point, we already discussed about it. Every component has a template which is used to communicate with Angular component classes. The same thing, the templates are used to define the views in Angular components. Templates is nothing but it's a simple HTML tags. And metadata. And metadata is nothing. We are going to describe about the component that is called as metadata. It may be a component, or it may be a module, or it may be a directive or service. The metadata is nothing but it's going to describe about the component or module or directives or services. And services is a reusability. I already spoke about it. Services is nothing. If you have any code repeated in your application, you can write it in services, and you can use the services in any other components, in all the components and all the modules, and wherever it is required, you can use it. And components of Angular. This is the basic diagram of components of Angular. Here we have designed. Here we have an employee. We are going to create an employee portal application. In that employee portal application, there may have some sales team persons, and there may be some development team persons there, and some testing team persons there. So you are going to develop a module like sales team as one module, and development team as another module, and testing team as in one more module in your employee portal. If you want to add an employee in sales team, you can perform add, update, delete using components. If you are performing any add update delete operation in all the modules, it will be going to write in your components, and the components going to be declared by modules. You can see here the add, update, delete. These three is present in all the components. So what we can do here, we can do do this add, update, delete logics in. We can write it as a services, and we can use the services in all the components. And this is the demo we are going to implement now. I strongly recommend to set up your environment using following this URL, because we don't have that much of time to set up environment to explain about the setup environment. So we are directly going to develop a CRUD operation using ASP NVC with Angular. You can see here, this is our sample demo application. Here I have created a project Angular sample demo, and I declared our project name as Angular sample demo. If you set up your environment for Angular, you can see the files source and node modules, source, and you can see the package.json file and tslint.json file, and you can see the bsconfig.json file. Yes, we can develop an Angular application using Visual Studio 13 as well as 15 version and as well as 17 version. Now, let's discuss about some basic files. Let me explain some basic files here, which is present in our Angular folder. We don't have that much of time to discuss all the folders, but here some main files here we should have to know about what it is. Here you should have to know what is package.json, which is here we are using this file to mention our required libraries to be downloaded from our npm. So the package here we can mention our required components to be installed. What are the requirements library need to be installed? You can configure here and you can download it from. To download it, you can just right click and you can just click restore packages. It will be downloaded from our npm and it will be going to install in your solution. And the next one is ts.config file. It is a compiler option which is going to check the files. For example, if I'm going to check here, skip library check, which means if any library it doesn't exist in our solution, no need to check, just skip the library check. Then that's the reason I configure here. And the next one is main.ts, which has a main function. Here I have mentioned the app module is our root module, and we can change our root module. If we create any other module, we can configure here, and we can set it as a root module. If we have any other module we want to set it as a root module, we can come here and we can change it and we can set it as a root module. And this is our index page, and this is going to be it has some list of configurations which is present in our node folder, and the style sheet also has been inherited from our solution. And in our app folder you can see that app module. This is our root module. Here you can see if we take, this is called an decorator, and this is our app module class, which is like a simple C# class, And in this class, we are decorating this class using ng module. If we decorating a class in the ng module, it will be considered as a module. If it is decorated as a AD component, the class going to be described as a, which means the class going to be a component, not a module. If we declare the decorator as AD directory, it going to be act as a directive. This is our root component here. You can see our root component here. This is our sample class. We have created the when we configure the angular.component.ts file, automatically it will be created here. Here you can see the class app component class here. This is the metadata for our app component, and we are importing it as a component, and we are declared as a decorator as an app component. Then we are used this component in our model, we inherited and we declared here. And here imports is when we have to import any other module in our root module, we have to import the modules here. If you want to import any component in our root module, we have to declare here. And the bootstrap is mentioning this is going to be render our root component as an app component. Now we have created. Now let's create a folder called data model, which is going to have, let me going to add a new entity framework. Let's select a data and select a edo.entity. Let's give it variable name. Here I'm going to give employee entities. Then click OK, then add. And here you can see, here we can list of options here. We can create a entity framework designer from database, or we can create an empty model and we can design our model here, and we can use code first model, or we can go with code first approach. But here I'm going to create a entity framework using database first approach. Let's click, let's add a new connection. Sorry, I'm going to connect the external server here. Let's click a new connection. Let's give Hulk scale 2060. Then we can select a table here. I'm going to DB and test connection. Click OK. Let's change it as employee entities. And click next. And click next. Select our tables here. You can see, now we can see our tables here. Let's click our table and click finish. It may take some time. Please wait until it completed, until it complete. Yes. Now you can see our employee model has been created. This is the EDMX and it is our model, and you can add a model if you want. You can add a model from DB. You can add an entity if you want. This is like model, it's like model first approach. If you are using model first approach, you can create a model here. But already we have implemented the DB first approach and we added a table DBL employee. Then close it. Then let's create our controller, and let's go our controller folder and let's add a controller. Let's give it a meaningful name. Select a MVC5 controller and give it employee controller. Now you can see our employee controller has been created. Here, for time saving, I already have one code. Let's copy all the code and copy it, and from there, just paste it. Here you can see that employee is not present in, so we have to implement. We have to using the import the folder here, Angular sample.demo and data model. Here our employee is employee entities. Give it its name, employee entities. Now you can see here we are writing the JSON result. It's going to be written in JSON result, and we are getting the list of employees from a database using entity framework. We wrote the method get all employees, and in that employee we have created the list of objects DBL employee details, and the employee list we are going to get the list from our entities using entity framework. In entity we have a DBL employees details, and it's going to return the list of employee details to the employee list, and the employee list going to be written as a response data. And this is the method which is used to get the particular employee from a database table. Then we are passing that particular employee ID, and here we are using entity. We are getting the employee details, and using where condition. You can see here we have used some where condition. This is called as link. Link is language integrated query, which is used to convert our C# code into a SQL format, SQL query language. And we are passing if any employee matches with employee ID, then get the employee, and they send the employee to the employee, save the employee to the employee object, and send the employee object as a response data. And next, as well as we have created insert employee, and as well as we created update employee, and as well as we created delete employee. If you are a beginner, I strongly recommend to overview that what is entity framework and what is link. It will be better understanding to you. It will be better useful to you. And next, let's add a component for our employee. Let's add a folder. Let's create a folder employee. In employee, let's add a component for our employee. Let's add a TypeScript file. Let's add a name employee.component.ts. Now let's create a class for our employee component. And the class going to be export. We are using export keyword. The component can be used in any other places if it is required. If we declare it as an export, we can use the same component in any other components. And let's declare the name it will be string. For testing purpose, let's add a value test string. This is then let's decorate our class using add component. Here you can see the IntelliSense is not appear here because we are not imported the import component from our Angular library. So to do, we have to include our component from our Angular library, Angular/core, and we can set here and add a component. Now you can see the component is appeared here. Let's use our component. Selector. Sorry. Let's use selector. Let's use selector. Let's declare a name as employee. This is our selector. Let's create a template and let's add just HTML content and using a interpolation. Let's copy the name here, paste it here. Now let's include our employee component. Now let's include our employee component in our app.NET module. Let's import app component from employee folder, then employee component. Here you can see now it will be IntelliSense with employee component. We have to declare the employee component in our declaration array. Then declare, then user in our app component. Let's use our employee selector here. Let's save it. It's on our project now. Let's see. Yes, you can see our employee component has been created. Now let's add instead of writing HTML here, we can write it in separate HTML file. Let's create a separate HTML file in our employee folder. Let's go to add employee dot component dot HTML. Let's create HTML. Let's get rid of this code. Let's copy this code, paste it here, save it. You can use template URL to map the record employee slash employee dot component dot HTML. Let's run our project again. Let's see, it will be going to render. Yes, as we expect, our result has been generated. Then let's go, and now we have to get a list of employees from employee table. Then we have to call the method get all employees. So what we can do, we have to going to perform a CRUD operation using Angular. So that CRUD will be same for if we take that employee portal, we have a sales team and development team. That we have to add the sales team, add, update, delete, and as well as we have to write a logic for development team, add, update, delete. that code has been repeated. Instead of writing in another component, what we can do, we can write it as a service. So let's create a service for our employee. Let's declare as employee dot service dot ts. Then create a class employee service, and here going to class. Before that, let's implement an interface. Okay. Employee yes, and create an interface. Export interface employee. It's going to be a string. Yeah, ID going to be a number. Employee city going to be a string, and employee age going to be a number. Now we have created our interface. Now let's implement this interface in our project, in our service. Let's interface import from our employee folder dot slash employee. You can see that employee is none. Intelligence. Then let's implement our employee interface. Now, if we created a service, it should be an injectable, but the injectable is not present here. Let's get rid of it. Let's import from Angular library. Let's import the inject in Angular library, which is present in Angular / core library. Now you can type it here, injectable. It comes here. Yes. Then let's inject. Then what is the use of injectable? If you use injectable, if you have in a service, if you are creating any injectable method, the injectable is required, which means don't worry about it right now. Let me create an HTML module from our Angular /HTTP. Yes. Here.
Ramesh, sorry to disturb you, Ramesh. Hello.
Response modules. Here I'm going to create a constructor for our service.
Hello.
Create a private variable for this class. Let's declare it HTTP. And here we are going to assign this HTTP. It will be an injectable service, and we are assigning the service to our private variable -HTTP property.
Hello, Ramesh. Manish is talking to you.
Now we created the HTTP module. Let's write a method. Get
Ramesh, wait. Ramesh, wait. Manish is calling me.
That it's going to return any means it's like varchar object.
Hello, Ramesh. Hello, Ramesh. Hello.
Okay, let's create an getEmployees method, and which is going to return any data type. The any data type means it is like varchar object. You can whatever we can store, it will be converted as a property. For example, if we store in a string, it will be act as a string. If we store in boolean value, it will be act as boolean. Let's return this dot http dot get method. Here you can see it asking URL. Let's post the URL for, already have an URL here to get all the employees from our folder. Let's copy, paste it here. And here it will be an observable response. So let's discuss observed response in later. First, we complete this method. So the observable is going to be written as an observed response. So we have to convert our any object as an observable. Let me try to create an observable. Here you can see the IntelliSense is not coming. So we have to import the library from our object, our Angular library, import which is present in rxjs slash yes. Then let's convert it as observable. Let's create it as a now. Yes. But now what happens here, the response is going to be an observable response, but it will be an JSON data. So what we have to do here, we have to map it and we have to say it as it going to return just a JSON data, but we have to convert it as any data type. To do, we have an option called map. To do, just import our rsjx slash rxjs slash a method called operator slash yes. You can see the map is going to come here. Let's convert our response to response, and we have to use array operator, and we have to convert our response as any data object using an response.json. Now it's completed. Let's go to our component. let's implement a method. Import our service. We have to import our service. To do list import from employee service. Save it. Let's import our service here. And if you want to use a service, you have to use a provider. It is the array object. We have to provide us employee service here. Let's implement our employee. Let's implement our interface also.
Ramesh, we need to wrap up here. Actually, we have another webinar at 6 p.m. So you can take the rest of your part in the next webinar.
Yes. Now we implemented our interface and as well as our employee service. Now let's create a property called employee.
I guess Ramesh is not listening to me.
Employee
I'm unable
array.
to.
Going to the array of employees. And let's
Shanta, can you hear me?
create a constructor.
Shanta Kumar, can you hear me?
Get rid of this code. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, Ramesh.
Hello.
No one is able to respond on why I'm not getting it.
So everyone, I need to stop the webinar here as we have another webinar scheduled for 6 p.m. So we'll cover the rest of part in next webinar by Ramesh.
Code we have to call. Let's we have to inject our service here. Get a private variable like employee service.